HitFilm Sensei here. Today in this video, we are revisiting the lightsaber effect, but this time, we're doing it in HitFilm Express 2017.
So actually, this effect is ridiculously simple and easy to do. I think that you will be astonished at how easy it will be for you to add a lightsaber effect to your footage due to the newest addition into the HitFilm Express software, and that is the light sword effect. So first, you're going to need some footage. I have some 14-second raw footage of me holding a lightsaber with a prop to it. So I'm going to right-click on that, and I am going to say, make it into a composite shot. Click OK. So you can see I have a red prop here in the lightsaber, and I'm standing there talking. It's moving around a little bit, right? So obviously, in the past, it would have been very difficult to work with. And then it fans real quickly as I do this. Notice it goes off the screen here. Some real pain in the padootie kind of stuff. So the first thing we will need to do is we will need to track, okay, the hilt position of the blade prop and then the tip position of the blade prop. So I'm going to twirl open the raw footage, and under tracks, I'm going to hit the plus icon, and notice that it went from the viewer to the layer, and then it brought up the tracking stuff here. We're going to leave it on single point position only and optical flow. And what I'm going to do is use my mouse wheel to move in here a little bit. I'm going to grab these and bring them over. I'm going to move in a little bit closer so that I have a really good look at this. And I'm going to position the dot right where I want it to be in the middle of the lightsaber blade. I'm going to reposition this so that it has a little bit better of an idea of what I'm looking for. And I'm going to go ahead and make this box way big. And then I'm going to start tracking. Now, the problem here is that it's going to need my help. And so I'm going to have to help it along the way, especially when I do the big fanning part. But if I hit the play, you can see, oh, and it stopped, right? Needs my help. But it didn't move anywhere. It's still in a good place. So I just hit play again, right? And it's tracking along now. It doesn't need much of my help, but I'm sure that it will, especially when I get to that fanning part. Oh, and it stopped again. I just hit play. And I keep doing that until I get to the fanning part, the part where the lightsaber fans across. Okay, so here is where it needs my help. So I picked the lightsaber up, and now I'm going to start swinging it. So I'm going to manually place it where it needs to be, and I'm just going to use the period key on my keyboard, and I am going to just physically move this so that it stays with the leading edge of my lightsaber, you see. Okay, the leading edge. So I am going to just follow this manually as it goes through its fanning motion. And you can see how much of a blur there is there. All right. And I'm just manually helping this thing out to get it to where it needs to be, you see. Notice that I'm following on the leading edge. This is very important because the lightsaber effect assumes that your tracking point is on the front side of the leading edge. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll be back. So I'm going to tell you that literally took about 1 minute for me to do. So it really wasn't that hard. And now I have a complete track of the hilt. So I'm going to rename that tracker point the hilt. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the tip. So I'm going to back up to the beginning, and I am going to say new tracking point, and I'm going to name it the tip tracking point. And what I need to do is I need to grab this and bring it up here to the tip. And I'm going to do the same thing. Now, this is going to be a longer process, and the reason is because it actually goes off the screen, so I'm going to have to manually track it every time it goes off the screen and all that kind of stuff. So now I've finished with the tip, and you can see that it went off of the screen a little bit all over the place, so I had to do some manual work on that, but trust me when I say it really did take less than 10 minutes to do both of those put together. So now that I have both the hilt and the tip, I'm going to go back to the viewer, and I'm going to add a new layer. It's going to be a point layer, and I'm going to label this one the hilt. okay? And that will be the hilt position, and then I'm going to add another point layer, and this one will be the tip, okay? So now if I go back into my raw footage and I get to the hilt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say transform from here all the data to the hilt point and click apply, okay? Then I'm going to look at the tip, and I'm going to say transform all of that data to the tip point, and again, click apply. Okay, so now what I have is, if I just highlight those 2 points, you can see that the tip is on the tip and the hilt is on the hilt. And if I play this, as the tip moves and the hilt moves, they move. The points themselves are also moving, and they're always with that. So that way, when I apply the data for the effect, I should say, for the lightsaber, it will follow those. And that's the hardest part, what I just did. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new plane layer. It's going to be black, and I'm going to label this as the blade and flare, okay, because that's what it's going to be. I'm going to right-click on this, changing the blend mode to add so that it's only additive and not showing all the black parts of the plane. I am now going to do a search for Light Sword 2.0 Auto, which is this right here, this one. And I'm going to drag this onto the plane. And you can see there it is. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go through this all one at a time. So we're going to start by attaching the hilt position to the hilt point, and boom, there it is. And then I am going to, twirling open the tip, I'm going to attach the tip to the tip point, and I'm going to zero out that 300 so that it's exactly on that point as well, okay? Now, you can see that that's a little bit narrower than the actual raw footage prop, so I'm going to up this to about 30 pixels. You can make that whatever you want, and I'm going to make the width of the tip at 30 pixels as well, okay? Now, this extension is the way that you would sort of extend a lightsaber blade. You could keyframe that, okay? We're already assuming that it's extended, so I'm just going to put that back at 100, and it'll be good. So now those two are there. Under core, the first thing we want to do is we want to change the color, and I think always white is best, okay? So white core is definitely, I think, the way to go. Okay, you can change this width. I mean, if I want it to be 300%, it can be really wide. If I want it to be 30%, it could be narrower than the core. Usually, I just leave that at 100%, but you can make adjustments on that if you like, okay? Now, the feather strength, if I were to knock that all the way down to 0, it would make a perfectly smooth core. If I were to bring this all the way up to 100, then it would be extremely feathered. I've found that the 75 is a pretty good number, so I leave it there. Stability is how much it sort of flickers back and forth on there. So if I want it to be completely stable, then I would go to 100 and it would never flicker. It would always stay the same size. If I went down to 0, then it's going to be all over the place in terms of flicker. I've found that if I leave it at the 80, it works pretty well, okay? Now, you can use a mask to help define this as well, but usually that's not necessary, so we're not going to worry about that. Okay, now let's look at the inner core. The inner core, the first thing we want to do, of course, is change the color of it. So we're going to bring it up, and we can change it to whatever color we want, but I'm going to make it red because my blade prop was red. Okay, to me, that's a little bit big of a core, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the width of that down to about 30. Okay, and I don't want the alpha to be quite so much. The alpha is how much it's really, shows through. If it's 0, then it's not showing through at all. So maybe 0.5 or so. Yeah, I like that. Again, the stability is how much it flickers or goes open and close. And then the flicker is also how much it sort of comes on and off, okay? The inner glow part. So now if I look at the outer glow, again, I want to change to a red color in my case. And I'm going to make this one about 125 pixels, so it's pretty wide. And I'm going to leave the alpha. If I did up that all the way, then it would look really strange. But about 0.15 is pretty good. I might even go to about a 150, right? But I think a 125 is good in this case, but it'll depend on your shot, kind of a thing. All right, so now let's talk about the path interpolation. Most of this stuff you won't have to mess with, okay? I never do because I don't have to, okay? But here's the thing. It's hanging out here, and then at some point, I make that big swing, right? And this is where you got to pay attention to how it looks when you do the swing. You can see that I have this big fanning, and you can see that the blade effect itself actually fans also, which is really cool because that means you don't have to actually make that happen. But in this case, because of the lighting of the room and the camera that I was using, you can see that there's more motion blur on my blade prop than there is allowed in the effect. So you change that through the motion persistence, okay? So if I were to up this to, or down this to say 50, then it would make it less. If I were to up this to say 250, then it would make it more. And I think actually in this case, I need to go to about 300 so it completely covers the blade prop as it's fanning, right? But you can just make that adjustment there and it automatically makes that blur happen for you, which is really nice because then you don't have to sit here and mask every last part of that, keep framing that thing all the time, right? So now if you want to adjust some of these other things, I left it on auto scale, the speed threshold, the swing threshold. You can actually change those to dial that in even more. But I've found that most of the time the auto scale works. Very rarely does it not work. And so there you go. So that's pretty much it. In a nutshell, that is your lightsaber blade prop. Now, the only other thing that I would like to do is add a little bit of a light flare here to sort of cover where the blade and the lightsaber actually meet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a light flare and drag it on here also, okay? I'm going to twirl it open, and I am going to zero out the hotspot center point, and then I'm going to say use the hilt point layer, and there it is. Now it's a little bit big, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial this down to something that's maybe a little more reasonable, maybe 0.3, and then I'm also going to bring in the scale a little bit. Okay, maybe 250 or so. I don't know. I could go up maybe to 0.5 and then knock that down to 200. You just sort of play with it until you get something that you really kind of like, okay? And that just sort of completes the look of the lightsaber, and that flare will follow wherever you go, right? If you're doing an extension of the lightsaber or an ignition, then that flare might get brighter and then kind of keyframe down to where it's going to stay on. But I like leaving that on at all times. It sort of creates that little flare light here, and it looks pretty cool. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have any questions about the lightsaber effect in HitFilm Express 2017, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. If you would like to keep up with the latest tutorial videos from HitFilm Sensei, consider liking the HitFilm Sensei Facebook page, following the HitFilm Sensei Twitter feed, and subscribing to the HitFilm Sensei YouTube channel. The links are in the description below. A new video comes out every Friday, and thanks for your support.